Hi there, this is a recording of the presentation that I gave at the ACTFL annual convention in November of 2015 on using Nearpod in foreign language classrooms. I did the presentation using an actual Nearpod presentation that was interactive for the people who attended my session. Obviously, this is just a recording, so there is not the interactive component, but I just thought I would include this in my experiential module. So this is just the title page, and I'm going to go through the slides that I shared with all of the attendees who came to my session. There was a little over 30 people that came to my session, which I was encouraged by. I thought that was a really good amount of people, and more than some of the sessions that I attended while I was at the convention, and it went really well. So this is on using Nearpod in foreign language classrooms. So first about me. I am a 3rd through 8th grade Spanish teacher in Birmingham, Michigan. I teach in Birmingham Public Schools at a school called Covington, which is a magnet school, district-wide magnet school that has a lottery to get in. And prior to that, this is not in chronological order, but I lived in Honduras while teaching at an international school. I also worked for an international nonprofit called Build On, which builds primary schools in villages in developing countries. And here's my social media accounts if you want to follow me on those things. This is what Nearpod says that it is. In other words, this is their materials about what they are. They say that it's something where you can create or download interactive multimedia presentations. Which is true. You can create them, which is what I generally do, but you can also purchase or sometimes for free download other people's presentations that they've made if it applies to your curriculum. You can share your interactive lesson and control the student's activity in real time. Your students interact and submit responses through any mobile device or PC or Mac. And you can monitor and measure student results on an individual and aggregate basis. So basically what it is it's an interactive web-based presentation app. So you make a slideshow, you can embed things into it that students can interact with, and whatever you are showing on or what you have on your screen is what students will be seeing on their screen. So that's what Nearpod says that it is. This is what I say that it is. And there's me. No, that's not really me. That's obviously not me. This looks more like me. What I say it is an easy way to create engaging presentations, create fun assessments, and collect data. So, one thing that I use it for is introducing vocabulary with one-to-one correspondence from an image to vocabulary. That's not anything radical. People do that with PowerPoint presentations and all kinds of other presentation software. So there's nothing really that exciting about it. Here we have a picture in Spanish. We would call this el gato, or maybe el gatito because it's a kitten. But there's a picture of it. Usually I'll show a picture and say the word and have the students say the word prior to showing them the word, which is on the next slide. Then they see it, sort of to mimic the way that we learn languages or learn our first language, which is through hearing and speaking, listening and speaking, and not necessarily through reading. Reading comes after. But also we're dealing with students who have some phonemic awareness and know how to read in their native language generally, so we don't have to take as much time necessarily in between them hearing and speaking and them reading and writing. So I usually, like I said, I'll introduce an image, say what it is, have them repeat, maybe even do some communication activities with it prior to showing them the word itself. So this is el gato. And then you can embed formative assessments into it. So I might ask a question or have them draw something, or there's many different things that you can do with Nearpod. So here we go, draw el gato. So maybe later in the lesson I would put this slide up and they would have to demonstrate that they remember what el gato is through drawing it. And this is really nice, particularly with younger students. Like I said, I work with students as young as 3rd grade. So sometimes asking them to write something is not the most effective way for them to show what they know. And particularly, what we're trying to assess in this particular slide is their reading comprehension. Can they see el gato and know that that is a cat? And they can demonstrate that through drawing rather than through writing or using English, which is always something we're trying to avoid, or using their native language. So they'll draw a picture. The cool thing is, after that, once they've submitted their drawings, once they draw it and they click submit, I can share their drawings. So if one student draws a great gato, I can share it to everybody else's screen. I kind of skipped something at the beginning, and I'm sorry about that. If you look at the top left, there is a pin. When you start a lesson, which I kind of jumped into this one without having that step because if you're listening to this, you couldn't log in. But there's always a pin that's just a 5-letter code that you would enter. You don't have to log into the site or the app. You just enter the pin and you're in the presentation. And that pin stays up there in each slide on the top left, which is great because sometimes students come in late or whatever the case may be, or they get locked out because their Wi-Fi goes out for a second and they are out of the presentation. So they don't have to interrupt the class to ask what's the pin. They can just look up at the screen. Usually I have these projected onto my smart board, but not always, kind of depending on what we're doing. But I can always put it up there real quick if somebody needs it. So anyway, once they submit a drawing, and usually with drawings I'll give them a time limit. I'll say, okay, you have 3 minutes to do this, because they'll spend all day on it if you let them. They'll submit their drawing, and then I can share individual drawings out to everybody's screen. And usually I like to ask if they mind if I do that, because students don't always want their work to be shared, and I try to be mindful of that. So this is an example of a formative assessment you can include. Another benefit of Nearpod is student engagement. When you ask a question, instead of having the same 3 or 4 kids always raising their hands, every student has to respond, and you have a very clear picture on your screen as the teacher of who has responded and who has not. So you can say, hey, I see that you didn't respond. Can you submit an answer? From my experience, students enjoy using digital tools. They get very excited when they hear that we're using Nearpod in a lesson. And like I kind of alluded to, my students seem to especially enjoy drawing and having their drawings shared out. So that is something that they look forward to. They usually ask if there's going to be a drawing part of the lesson. So it really gets students involved, which is a big part of the battle I find in teaching a foreign language is getting them to want to do it and getting them to want to engage with the material. So here's an example of a poll question. Now you don't have the ability to answer it, but what do you think is the most beneficial aspect of using Nearpod? With poll questions, you can answer more than one. Sometimes you have to instruct students to answer only one, and they sometimes listen and sometimes don't. But here, normally what you would see on the left side here is a list of the students who are logged in. They enter their name after they enter the PIN, and you have to instruct them to enter their correct name so that you know who they are if you're going to use it as an assessment tool later on. And then as they answer, it starts to populate. There's little dots that populate in the fields that they answer, and this over here starts to get shaded in with the different colors of the answers. So there might be some blue, some yellow, and some orange in this particular one. Once everybody's answered, They can if you have this up on the screen, some polls like this one, I don't really care if people see each other's answers. So you might have this up on the screen and they could just look up there and see how people are answering. Sometimes you don't want it up there though if you're doing it a poll where you want to see what they know. So you can leave it off the screen. My remote on my projector has a freeze function and it also has a blank screen function, so that I can just turn the screen off without turning off the whole projector, which usually takes several minutes to warm up when you turn it back on. But you can blank out the screen, and then when you press it again, it comes back on quickly. Or you can freeze it, and that way they don't see what other people are answering, and they have to come up with their own response. Once they've all done that, you click this little share button, and they will get a graph that shows how people answered, and then you can share with them what if it's a question that has a correct answer, you can share with them what that is, and then they kind of get a sense of what the rest of the class is thinking, if they're in the majority or in the group that got it right, and it gives you an idea pretty quickly of whether the majority of the class is understanding what you're asking. So that's an example of a poll. Another thing you can do is embed videos. So this video doesn't want to work right now. I believe it was a video having to do with El Gato. So one note about videos is that during whole class instruction, I always play the video on the projector. If each student plays it on their own device, they will all be watching it at slightly different points, as playback does not sync up with each screen. So if I press play on mine, it's not playing on their devices. If they all start pressing play, it's going to be a kind of a cacophony of noise. So that doesn't work out too well. I don't tend to embed too many videos. Sometimes I'll just open a different tab, up here on the web browser and play a video that way, because I don't really see there's not a huge point in embedding it. You can have these presentations saved where if students miss a class period, they can go through and do the session without you. I don't do that very often because I usually do a mixture of instruction and formative assessment in my lessons. But if I were going to do that, I might embed that video if I was showing a video as part of it so that the student could watch it on their own. So anyway, that's just a quick tip about showing videos. There are some similar programs out there. One of them is called ClassFlow, which has some benefits. It's compatible with ActiveInspire, and there's a lot of teachers who use ActiveInspire already and have lots and lots of lessons, so they can upload those right to ClassFlow and then edit them in there to add some of the more interactive elements to it. It has more features. There's a lot that students can do with ClassFlow. Like you can, I saw one teacher or a demonstration of it where they had arranged all of these faces of former presidents, and you could drag the faces to be in the correct chronological order. So there's a little bit more that you can do. But it's less easy to use. It takes a lot more knowledge to create presentations in it, and it's a little bit more glitchy when you're transferring slides. There's a teacher in my school who's a math teacher who also uses Nearpod a lot, and she was trying to mess around with ClassFlow a little bit, and she was trying to upload some presentations she had made previously in ActiveInspire, and it didn't work very well. A lot of the symbols were messed up, and obviously with math, or really with anything, if it doesn't transfer over the data correctly, then it's not going to work very well, and it's going to create more work for you going forward. So I haven't really tried to mess with ClassFlow in maybe a year or so. I'm planning to kind of get back into it, but I don't know if they've fixed some of these issues or not, and it's worth looking into as well. Then there's also Kahoot. I think most people at this point who use technology are aware of Kahoot. Um, Kahoot is simple. It's just kind of the quiz aspect of Nearpod, so it's more of an assessment tool than anything. Students really like it, and I've had students make their own Kahoots to use with the class. I've also had them find Kahoots to do, and it's something where it can be really student led and very simple to make and quick, but it does not have all of the presentation features to use it as an instructional tool. It's really just an assessment tool, but it's not bad. So another thing about Nearpod is that it gives you reports. Every time that you complete a session with a class, you can view data about how they answered those questions, and it saves it indefinitely. So you can click on any of your presentations and it will give you all of the times that you've used that presentation and how students responded to the questions. It even saves their drawings in there. So it's a really great tool, I find, for assessment purposes, because it's a quick way to collect data for everyone in the class, and then I don't have to do. I only see my students typically, the third through sixth graders that I teach, I only see twice a week, and our third and fourth graders particularly use the grade levels use standards-based report cards. So I found it very stressful to try to have enough data to be able to say with any certainty what proficiency level my students were at. And so I find this to be a very valuable tool to collect data and to be able to show parents and other stakeholders and students how they're doing, and you know, it kind of it makes it simple. It puts it all in one place, and it allows you to go back and look and you know, adjust your instruction accordingly if you think that you need to. So reports are really one of the greatest parts of using Nearpod, in my opinion. The cost, this is free to sign up for, and you get 50 megabytes free, and you can have up to a class of 30 people. If you pay $10 a month, your space goes up to 3 gigs, and which is quite a bit, and then you can have up to 50 students in a given session. And then there's discounts for school and district. My district happens to have an account with it, and which is really awesome because I have, I believe, 20 or 30, I think 20 gigs of space, which I won't use up. And that's really great because I don't have to worry about running out of space or having to delete lessons that I've created. One piece of advice, if cost is a factor, is you can make your presentations like in PowerPoint or some other program and then upload them to Nearpod as you use them and kind of delete and then re-upload later. It's not ideal. It's more work than just being able to make it once and leave it there. But it is a workaround if you are not able to pay for it. And there's frequently deals for referrals to upgrade and get more space and features. And sometimes it's just, you know, getting a few other people to sign up for it. And since it doesn't cost anything, you know, you can ask whoever and say, hey, sign up for Nearpod, and you know, then I'll get more free space. But it's something worth talking to administrators about if you're really planning to use it, especially if you're only going for the 3 gig membership, because $10 a month isn't really that much for a pretty powerful instructional tool. So this is where the quiz would come in. And obviously you're not going to take the quiz now. I usually put a quiz at the end of my lesson, or I'll do like an exit ticket type question, because you can do an open-ended question. I'll just say, you know, how do you feel? I'll say something like, how do you feel about the material we learned today? Do you feel like you understand it? Or something like that. But oftentimes I'll put a quiz, and kids really want to know how they did. And again, you can share it to them, and then it will show them their individual score and which questions they got correct or incorrect. So this was kind of the exit ticket question that I used in my ACTFL presentation, which I said, could you see yourself using Nearpod in your classroom? Why or why not? And that was pretty much it. So I only had about an hour to talk, and there were a lot of questions, and as I went along, but people seemed pretty engaged, and I think a lot of people went off and at least played around with it, and I find it really useful. But obviously it depends on, one thing it depends on is technology being available. One thing I should have said at the beginning is that basically any device works with Nearpod. Kids use their cell phones, they can use iPads, they can use a laptop. If they're using a phone or an iPad, they typically have to download the app, which is free. But if they're using a laptop, they can log in through nearpod.com, and then there's a spot where they can just enter the PIN, and they don't have to sign up or sign in or log in or anything like that. So it works pretty well at where I teach, because I have a class set of about 10 iPads. Actually, sometimes I have access to up to 15 or 16 iPads, and then that combined with a lot of my students, particularly as they get older, have their own smartphones. I usually have enough devices for everyone to have their own. Oftentimes with the younger grades, I pair kids up and they have to work with someone, which isn't ideal for assessment purposes, but it can still work. But in general, you can do this in a computer lab if you want to, or you can just have students use their own devices if they have access to them. So that's really there's two drawbacks to using Nearpod. One is if you don't have access to devices. The other is having it be web-based. If the internet is out, or the Wi-Fi is out, or if it's slow, you're not going to have a very good time doing your lessons. So just like anything using technology, it's always important to have a backup plan and something that you can do if you can't log in. So that was my presentation for ACTFL. I hope it was educational for you, and feel free to contact me if you're interested in learning more about using Nearpod.